But then you just realize he's kind of dumb because he actually really does care about Chris Pratt. Don't we all? But the
not the internet apparently. Yeah.
I finally watched. I finally watched.
I
Finally
watched. I
finally
watched.
I finally watched.
Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of I Finally Watched. This is David.
And this is Alon, and I finally watched The Lookout.
So, I was actually having a conversation with Garrett, who we've had on the pod a couple times, about Joseph Gordon-Levitt, because I just brought up this movie. And it was like both him and I like kind of got into Joseph Gordon-Levitt like through this and Brick. And I don't think I saw this in theaters, but I'm not exactly sure. I definitely I think had it on my radar as something I wanted to watch, and so I bought a copy of the DVD back when you did such things. And then we were also just talking about like his career. Like he had this huge run where he like just got to open movies like this, you know what I mean? And he worked with Rian Johnson, who I guess Rian Johnson's like too big for him anymore, but like this run from 05 with Brick through like 12, like I think we decided that the point that like killed this run was Don John, where he basically made himself this guy that got to fuck slutty Scarlett Johansson. It was like,
Is that what killed it for him?
That was a bridge too far. After if you look at what he made before, and it's not like he's made bad stuff since then, but I don't think he's had like the same like leading man career that he had before that. But he's done like a ton of good stuff since, but just like that was sort of like when he didn't get to do just his own thing anymore. Because like after that he made The Walk in 2015, where I guess he was the lead, and that was really, I think that was supposed to be good. I saw the documentary. But then like Snowden, Trial of the Chicago 7, and then just, you know, some other random stuff here and there. So, but he just, it is kind of funny how he had this just run where he was just making these movies as like the star, and kind of like, you know, he was really great in all of these too.
Yeah, I know that Taylor and I were talking about that from like 2009 to 2012. Like those 3 years was probably his biggest years. And like you said, he never really like fully fell off, but he definitely wasn't having as many good roles as he previously has had. And I think I've first was introduced to him with 500 Days of Summer. But then I think 50-50 was another one that I went to go see in theaters with him. And obviously The Dark Knight Rises, I think, and Looper, and yeah, Don John pretty much. I didn't bother seeing it. I just hated, I heard the premise and I was like, I hate that. I'm not going to go see that.
It was okay. I was someone who went, okay. I saw all of his movies back then. So I saw right before that Premium Rush, which was like the fixed gear bicycle delivery boy movie. Yeah.
10 Things I Hate About You was also really good.
Yeah, that was before, and he was like part of more of an ensemble.
Yeah, and then Inception. I think Inception is the thing that really like rocket launched his career.
But that was 2010. He had already done 500 Days.
You think, okay, so you think he got Inception because of 500? That might be true. But then
I don't
Looper,
know. I think just this period he was freaking kind of doing really, really well. But back to this movie, I think watching it this time, I may have like, it's always funny because I brought this up with another movie we did recently. When I'm being like super critical and trying to like take notes and figure out like different aspects of the movie, I was like, there are certain parts of this that I actually find kind of like not great.
Sure.
But still, overall, I thought this was still a really great movie. I think it's like very inventive, the way it's directed, the way the story's told, the fact that you have these two main characters one's a main character and then the secondary character, Jeff Daniels, just like having these limitations that sort of create the way the story has to go. I think it's like a really inventive way to tell this story, and I just liked it. So, what did you think for your first watch?
I really liked it. One thing I liked a lot about it is that I didn't quite know where it was going. I knew very little about this movie. I didn't realize that there was a cause to his brain injury. I thought he was born with it, like sort of like a on the spectrum character. So I kind of like this. I like the guilt that came with it, and his trying to kind of overcome. Like he was at fault, obviously, but he paid the price too. Um, obviously not as much as the people who died, but he had to like live with this thing that he's done and this injury that he's done upon himself. So I thought that was really interesting. And then his dynamic with the Jeff Daniels character, I thought that was really interesting too. And if you look at the poster, kind of makes it look like Jeff Daniels was in on the heist too. So I was like, oh, I was waiting for that moment to come up, and I was like, oh no, I read that wrong. He's just like his buddy. So yeah, the actor who plays Gary, what's his name?
Matthew Good.
Matthew Good. You've never seen the movie Stoker, but I first watched Matthew Good in Stoker, and he tends to always play like that pretty boy that is bad. He's a bad dude in the movie. And so as soon as he walks up to the bar, I was like, okay, that. And I love like how blatant it is for me watching the movie, like, oh, he's manipulating him from the beginning. And I thought Isla Fisher was also manipulating him from the beginning, but it's just was really sad to watch, like him being completely unaware that was happening to him. So just everyone's dynamic, just everyone, how they like acted off of each other was really good and interesting throughout the whole film.
Yeah, so I mean, this came out before, or did this come out before The Watchmen? I can't even remember.
It has to, because he was so much younger in this.
Right. Well, in The Watchmen, yeah, now that I think about it, Watchmen was probably 09, maybe 10. I think 09. But anyway, so I saw this before that, but the first time I really like kind of honed in on like who's that guy was when Matthew Good played Ozymandias.
Right.
And then you just see him in this, and it's just like such a different character. I also I never saw this movie, but I always like joked about this with one of my friends, because he gave this interview after the movie Leap Year. It was just like, yeah, it was a shit movie. I know it's a shit movie, but I mean, I got paid for it, and like it's fine. Like, it just, sometimes they aren't good. Just like, I realized it's funny, like the actors that when they realize, like, as they're doing it, and sometimes they realize as they're doing it that it's horrible, and then it's like comes out and it's great. I think we should get into this one, and one thing I really like, unlike the start of this podcast, is the movie just like gets into it very quickly. I appreciate that they didn't spend too much on his before life. It just basically starts with the accident, a couple minutes before the accident starts, and he turns off his lights going down this road, which is like super stupid. But
and what
honestly,
was that, like fireflies? Fireflies, right?
Yeah. Just just like the that what's the 10 Million Fireflies song?
Oh, by Owl City, right?
Owl City, yeah.
Yeah.
He's just trying to live it. And then just the 1 in a 1,000 chance, whatever. There's a tractor, and he just
1 in 1,000. Every 1,000 miles, there's just a stalled. What do you call it? A combine. Just out in the middle of the road.
He was 18, so he started driving when he was 16. So about 1,000 days. You know what I mean? And then it just goes immediately to 4 years later. And this is what I was talking about, where it starts with his daily routine and how he has to, talk about it, and the class that he goes to, and
that's one thing that I really liked about this is the framing of the whole
Yeah.
movie is based in this like it's based in this well, first it's based in this like step by step thing, but then it very quickly evolves into what Jeff Daniels says. It's like telling a story but start backwards. And that's when you get the whole like motif of the movie is like for him to be able to accomplish what he needs to accomplish due to his head injury, he has to start a story but backwards. And I think that's just brilliant. Like it's just great in this movie.
Yeah. And one thing I will say, so this isn't like an hour and 40-minute movie. This could have been like an hour and 25-minute movie because they spend so
Where do you
long.
want to cut off the 20 minutes?
Oh, I'll tell you as we go. I'll point some stuff out. They just establish so much his limitations, right? So they start with the daily routine thing, and one of my favorite lines, and I think this just applies to me too, is I don't read the paper; it confuses me, which makes me mad. It's like
You
I don't read
relate to
the
that?
news. Yeah, and then like him locking his key in his car, and he has to get the spare, and then he goes to the ice rink to watch people ice skate, which he can't do anymore, and then to see his ex-girlfriend, which is a little stalkerish, but I mean, he's got a head injury, can't really fault him.
It's also a guilt thing again because actually
Yeah.
I was very surprised to find out that she was even alive. I thought because we knew that two people were dead. I thought the twist was going to be that like the guy died and his girlfriend died, but like the girlfriend of the guy lived or something like that. But it ended up it's weird too. Like it looks like they had a head-on collision, but the two people up front lived. You know?
Yeah, well, she might have been wearing a seatbelt and like hit the thing. They were both sitting on the top of the car, like
Yeah.
so they were not in a good position. So next he goes to his caseworker Janet, who's played by Carla Gugino, and like I love the way it's just more establishing, right? That I was saying it's kind of repetitive, but like he gets there and she's like, "Oh, what do you want to order?" And the waitress walks up and he's like, I'll have what she's having," because he can't make decisions, right? And then he
Right.
tries to hit on her, and he just does this. The funny thing is, like, it's not Tourette's, but he has this thing where he just kind of says the thoughts in his head, and it's like the what men want type thing, right? But
Sure.
I think about fucking you all the time. She's like, I think people in the kitchen might not have heard you. You know what I mean? And so it's just like it just keeps establishing it. And one thing I think I'm not sure if you noticed this, but there's the car that drives by him as he gets home the first night to his apartment where he lives with Lewis. There's a car that drives by him. I'm fairly confident that's the bad guys.
Well, before we get to that, I was just surprised that we didn't have another scene with Carla Gugino because there seemed to be a lot that was established, and what I would have liked to seen is like once he, I don't know, figured his shit out at the end, he had like another scene with her and he was like a lot better or something, but it just was like a one and done sort of scene. It was just to establish how messed up his brain is basically, and then we're ready to move on.
I feel like she had to have other scenes that ended up getting cut. It's like the only explanation.
You feel like she shot stuff, but it just never made it to the final cut.
It's just way too small of a part. Like it just doesn't really make sense. So then we get the scene where he like can't make dinner and he can't find the can opener. He just freaks out and throws shit everywhere. And Jeff Daniels comes up and just like, as a blind man, finds the can opener immediately. I guess he was looking for the hand one, and it's just like the big, like mechanical one, the electronic one.
I think
so
he picks up like a garlic peeler and mistakes it for the can opener. Yeah. Yep.
And then this is where we get the you were talking about Jeff Daniels is like, oh, you got to tell the story at the end. Start with Goldilocks. And he's like, I don't want to fucking tell Goldilocks. And he's like, you need to do Goldilocks. Like tell. And I think I was telling you, I think earlier, this is where, or no, maybe I was talking about Garrett with this too. But this is where I realized like Jeff Daniels is like an amazing like dramatic actor.
No, it was me. Yeah, this is because I said the same thing. I said, oh, this is where you really realize that Jeff Daniels is an amazing actor, and Joseph Gordon-Levitt and blah blah blah. And you're like, yeah, you are now experiencing the thing that I experienced 15 years ago when you first watched the movie.
That's true. That's true. I remember that now. I had multiple conversations about how awesome Jeff Daniels is, particularly in The Martian, which we already talked about.
Yes, yes.
And then we get to the bank thing. And I didn't realize this, I guess, before, but he drives to this bank that's like an hour, 90 minutes away from where he lives in Kansas City every
Yeah.
night to go do this job.
Well, one thing that I found completely inconsistent within the movie is that he has this brain injury that doesn't allow him to remember everything or get his like facts confused or stuff like that. Yet he can perfectly parallel park. And I know people who don't have brain injuries who cannot parallel park, and it just took me out of the movie right there. Let me tell you.
You're like you're a neuroscientist. Do you understand that?
I mean, okay, so so what? His brain injury made him deficient in like having normal conversations and the order of things and forgetting things and losing things, but it somehow like made him a perfect parallel parker.
Or maybe he could parallel park before that and it just didn't affect it.
I guess I just found that part kind of funny.
Didn't even notice it. I'm more just flabbergasted that the hiccups that created for you, but I didn't even notice it. And then we get this part where he asks the bank manager if he can be a teller, and the guy just completely blows him off and is like, you know what? There's a light in the back. You need to fix that. And then we get like the flashback to his friend getting killed. And we get that the car is casing outside. And this is the first time where we get to hear that our character's name is Chris Pratt.
Yeah, I was wondering when we were going to get to that elephant in the room.
Yeah, the Star-Lord in the room.
Star-Lord in the room.
What I find most amazing, because you and I talked about this, Chris Pratt was supposed to interview for this role. He scheduled an interview.
Audition?
Yeah, sorry, interview, audition, whatever. He scheduled an audition for this role, but then had like a family thing he wanted to do in Mexico, so he like canceled it and was hoping to reschedule it. And by the time he got back, Joseph Gordon-Levitt had the part.
That's funny, because I don't think that he was as big of an actor as Joseph Gordon-Levitt at the time.
But this movie, what's interesting is, so it was written by Scott Frank, right? And he originally had several other people that he was trying to get directed. Steven Spielberg once considered it, Sam Mendes, and then David Fincher was attached to direct. And then once Fincher left, Scott Frank just decided to do it himself. And so at that point, I think this movie has to be fairly low budget, right? You know, you have a lot of people doing some small roles. And so I think you didn't necessarily need, I don't know. I mean, is Jeff Daniels the star of this? Could you do it Jeff Daniels and then like, I don't know. Did you need the star power of Joseph Gordon-Levitt? Because honestly, I don't even know that he had that much star power. The biggest thing he had done was Brick, which was like an indie success at that point, you know. So
I mean, he's a big child star. You could bring that into consideration, and then
a lot of Third Rock from the Sun fans.
Or Angels in the Outfield, you know, things like that.
Obviously.
But I don't know. I mean, maybe they weren't really looking for stars, and they're around the same age, right? Chris Pratt and Joseph Gordon-Levitt. So yeah, I mean, they would probably, if they were in the Hollywood circulation, go for the same role.
If David Fincher directs this movie, first of all, we don't get The Curious Case of Benjamin Button, which is like just a loss for society in general. But two, like there's no way Joseph Gordon-Levitt gets the starring role, right? Like I don't see Fincher, you know what I mean? I mean, honestly, probably runs it back with Zodiac. We'll get Jake Gyllenhaal.
Really? You think so? I was just going to ask you, who do you think Fincher mostly casts in his films?
Well, I mean, I think Jake Gyllenhaal and Joseph Gordon-Levitt are at similar ages, right? And then he cast him as a young guy in Zodiac 2007, same year as this. Yeah, I guess that would have also affected Zodiac, which you just can't have. And maybe
You
when
know,
he was attached, he could have been attached years earlier, so it probably wouldn't have affected anything.
yeah. So if Fincher did it, it would have been Jesse Eisenberg instead of Joseph Gordon-Levitt. It would have been Brad Pitt instead of Matthew Good. It would have been what's his name? The guy from
Morgan
Fight
Freeman
Club. No. Yeah, Morgan Freeman as
as
the
Lewis.
Jeff Daniels character. Yeah.
I want to keep Jeff Daniels in there. So let's get back to it. So I also, well, real quick though, the Fincher, just like Fincher doing this movie is very intriguing to me. Just like Fincherifying this movie is something that I would love to have seen. So we get to the bar scene. Right before this, we saw where Gary uses his inhaler, which is someone uses an inhaler. That's going to be a big plot point. Like, have you ever? I don't think. I mean, it'd be hard to think of, but imagine a movie where someone just uses an inhaler and it just never comes up.
Yeah.
You go to the prop guys and you're like, listen, this guy has to have an inhaler. You're like, oh, what is this for what's it for? No, just like an affectation. We don't really need, it's not going to play a part. We just need him to have an inhaler.
I love how when we are introduced to Matthew Good, and I think it's the first time that they meet at the bar, he pulls out his inhaler and he takes a puff at it. And he looks at Joseph Gordon-Levitt, who has a brain injury. And then he's like, yeah, we all have our things. And he like looks at his inhaler, like he's comparing asthma to a fucking frontal lobe brain injury. It's like, shut the I have asthma. I use an inhaler. No way would I ever compare it to be like, yeah, well, you think your brain injury is bad? It's hard for me to breathe sometimes.
How many of your friends did your inhaler kill? I like the bits where he tells the woman, he's like, I thought I was the only good looking person in this bar. Joseph Gordon-Levitt writes it down, and then later on he's like, I thought I was good looking.
The look that the woman gave him, I know that look. I've gotten that look before, and I don't even have a brain injury, but
I thought you were just gonna stop.
I don't even have a brain. But yeah, that was hard to watch. There's another really cringe scene in there, in the movie somewhere. I think it was also when he was just, his parents, him going back home and like having Thanksgiving with his family was just, oh my God. It was hard for me.
Except Jeff Daniels was the best part of that Thanksgiving.
The way he told his brother, he's like, oh, there's stairs. Well, now you're going to have to carry me up them. And he's like, really?
And I forget his mom's name. Was it Maura? She's like, I don't know. He goes to the mom. He's like, Barbara, did you cook this bird? She's like, no, I didn't. He's like, okay. And then he's like, ask her about another recipe. She's like, this is my grandma's. And he's just, oh, it's so fucking good. It's just like eating with his mouth open. And then like bumps the like girl who's like so disgusted by him.
He asked her a question, right? He was like a riddle or a limerick or something.
Joke. Yeah, it was it
was a joke.
It was a play on words, or a pun, as some people might call it.
Yes.
So he kind of points out Isla Fisher when they're at the bar too. Matthew Good does, and it's like, oh, look at her. And it's like fairly obvious what he's trying to do with her in the beginning. Didn't you think, like when you saw the Isla Fisher part of it, like didn't you assume she was kind of put up to it, or?
I didn't think at first the girls were put up to it. Not until I think she comes up to him at the house party and like kisses him or something, right? I was like, oh shit, right? But I just like how Matthew Good leaves him at the bar, goes to the table with like his buddies and like whispers something to one of them, and they all turn and like smile like like all have a shit-eating grin on their face, like staring at him. And I was just like, well, just make it super obvious. Why don't we?
I'm just wondering how much did they know about his brain injury? Because they had been following him for weeks, it seems like. Like, the backstory on this criminal outfit is kind of interesting to me.
Because it wasn't just this bank that they were targeting. It was like multiple banks at different times, right?
Well, they were trying to figure out the bank to get, and then I think they realized based on deposits that Chris's bank was the one, and also its like location and the fact that there was only like one deputy who was watching it. Um, the next thing is Thanksgiving, which we mostly covered, but I did love the chess scene at the end where his dad beats him, and his dad's like, "All right, let's go again." He's like, "I don't really want to." And he's like, "Would you rather let me win?" And he's just like, Dad, I can't play chess with you anymore. Like, this isn't, you're beating a 5-year-old. Like, why do you still want to do this?
I also am really confused on an all black chessboard. Can you explain that to me? And also, not just an all black chessboard, on how confusing that is to a normal person, but like thinking you're one upping your son who has a brain injury on an all black chessboard.
I didn't notice it. I wasn't really.
You didn't notice that
chess.
all the pieces were black? That I looked at that. I was like, surely they're gonna mention it, and then they keep talking about it. I'm like, surely they're about to mention it, and then they just move on. And I'm like, surely at some point in the movie they're gonna come back and mention it, because it's such a weird prop to have, right?
The things you've gotten hung up on this movie are just, I don't even know what to do with you.
The devil is in the details. That's all I gotta say.
So after they leave, the Jeff Daniels line too, and it's funny, like Jeff Daniels comes off as like very like wise and with sage advice, and then other times like very overprotective and maybe like overstepping his bounds. But he's like, I don't think you should go home anymore, which is probably true, but also like not your place.
But you could tell, like, it's because when we get the backstory on how he became blind, right? He wasn't born blind; he became blind. He probably had to go through a lot of the same kind of stuff where it's like his family never got used to his handicap, and people treated him differently, and et cetera, et cetera. So he probably knows the ins and outs of like the waves of the way people are going to treat you different, right? So he's probably the best person to tell him, like, and also his family is just a bunch of shit people.
That's what money will do to you, man. It makes you pompous. So the next thing we get is just the cop that comes by and brings him the donut. And he's like, hey, you got to lock that back door. And then he points it. I love the way that they established this deputy donut, because he's like, oh, well, you left your door open. He turns around, he's like, ah, shit. I just think that's a quick, funny scene, and probably the saddest part in the movie later on.
As soon as I saw him, I was like, he's going to die. Like, there's no way of getting around it. Yeah,
it sucks, especially because his wife was literally going into labor. But we'll talk more about it. He totally reminds me of David Arquette's character in Scream. Like, in between David Arquette's character and the Scary Movie character.
Yeah. He actually reminded me kind of like a Midwestern cop, like from Fargo, but like without the accent.
Well, they're in Missouri, so.
But he doesn't have like
Kansas, so it checks out.
Yeah, well, fine. Also, I was thinking, like, is there an issue with him? And I love like he's not the greatest.
Is he
like,
slow?
Well, not even like, I understand you're halfway between the Scary Movie David Arquette character and the actual David Arquette character, right? But his whole thing about like, you missed a spot, I was just like, is he just insensitive, like, because he's kind of dumb, or is he insensitive because he's just kind of like not caring, or you know what I'm saying? Like, is he just insensitive for the sake of being insensitive? But then you just realize he's kind of dumb because he actually really does care about Chris Pratt, don't we all? But not
the internet, apparently. Yeah.
But yeah, I think the heartbreaking part is when he yells at him, and you wonder if he yells at him because he's actually frustrated, or he yells at him because he wants him to just like stay the fuck away.
It's probably a little bit of a combo. I think it's mostly for him to stay away, because at that point he's like, I'm a bank robber. I'm going to help rob this bank. We get back to when he gets with Lovely. They meet at the bar, and then they go back to Gary's place, and she just goes into great detail about this hockey game that she saw with him, And I'm just like, it comes off as so fake. But I guess the point of this is to establish like how popular Chris Pratt was as this hockey player in high school. Because like she couldn't have found out those details any other way except she was there, and she just remembered all of it. So it's just interesting, but I was just like, it seems so fake because she's clearly like with him on purpose.
Yeah. And the fact that like Jeff Daniels is like, what's her name? And he's like, Lovely. And he's like, well, does she have a last name? He's like, Lemons. And he's just like, Lovely Lemons. And he's like, yeah, well, that's her stage name. And he doesn't see it right away that she like was a stripper. And Jeff Daniels is just like sitting there like, nah, something's up. Like he's blind. He doesn't even know how hot she is. And he's just like, nah, something's up.
Well, it's a weird thing to like just accept that all you get to know is her stripper name. It's a weird thing that if she seems like she's giving him the stripper name because she doesn't want to give her real name because eventually this is going to end in a bank robbery and she wants to get away clean. But just use a fake name that's not a stripper name, perhaps.
Yeah, perhaps.
And then she's talking to him and he's like, I want to see you naked. And this is a real hang up with you in the Casablanca episode, but I just want to make clear they had sex, right?
When?
Right then and there.
No, like before she comes out to get the thing from the fridge and Jeff Daniel confronts her.
No, they had sex then too. Yes, when they're at the.
No, I mean I know. Yeah, I know that because he comes, right? But he comes back home and Jeff Daniels says, "You dirty dog, you got laid, didn't you?" Yeah, I know. I know they had sex.
His superpower is he's like, I smelled the sex on you.
I forgot he was blind. So I was like, oh, he must have noticed he had like his clothing was disheveled or something. And then it occurred to me, I was like, wait, how the fuck did he know?
And then he opens his notebook and she's like, I can't believe I fucked Chris Pratt. Like she wrote it in there, which clearly like that too is like Isla Fisher's motivation in this is like, I think the movie is trying to say like she was forced into this and then she started to develop feelings for him. And that's why she had to get out. But like the thing like, oh, I can't believe I fucked Chris Pratt when she wrote that in there. That's either like, they have to know about his head injury, right? They have to know that he needs that notebook because they've been following him. So she wrote that so he'd like remember.
You know how you said that I get hung up on like the little details of this movie?
Mm-hmm.
I feel like the fact that his name is Chris Pratt diminishes quite a bit of this movie.
It's just real bad luck on their part, honestly.
Oh man, it's just like every time you say it, I just imagine Chris Pratt, the actor. And
let's give him. We'll just for the rest of the podcast we can switch it up. Let's give him a name that's like we'll do Timothy Chalamet.
Adrian Brody. Oh, okay.
Well, I was thinking of a name that wasn't an actor at the time, so Adrian Brody acted in 2007.
I thought you were just going to give out a name. We could just call him Chris and just kind of, but yeah, I mean, her motivation the film does make it feel like she's actually starting to fall for him, especially when she kind of looks in the car and sees the gun that Matthew Good and Bones is loading up. And she like looks at him like, a gun, really? Like, this is going to end badly. You see her. I think she doesn't know how deep she's in, maybe. At least that's what I get from that scene.
Yeah. You know, this was filmed in Manitoba, Canada, and that's just kind of, I mean, obviously for money purposes, but, you know, it kind of stinks, you know what I mean?
Well, it's not actually shot in Kansas?
Yeah, no. Kansas doesn't provide the tax benefits needed, which you think they would, you know what I mean? So the next scene is the Thanksgiving party at Gary's house. They tour the farm and then like, there's like, how'd you get this? And he's like, oh, Bone negotiated with the owner. And I was like, oh, so Bone killed that guy. And then the owner shows up.
Yeah. And then Bones just like makes him disappear. Like, and that was never addressed. It's just weird.
It's very weird. I want to talk about Bone, and now's just as good a time as any to talk about
Sure.
Bone.
I want to talk about Bone too.
So Bone barely speaks in this movie. Um, and I think that is a practical reason that you just don't know how good this guy can do. Although his lines at the end, they're fine. He has not done a whole
That's
lot.
okay.
He did The Lookout, where he played Bone. He did some shorts. He did one episode of Warehouse 13. He did a TV movie in 2010. He played a homeless man on Rookie Blue. And then he was a janitor in the show Hannibal. And then he played Higgins in Stage Fright, which I just imagine he was like, I don't know, killed in, or maybe I've never seen that movie. It's just this guy. It's just crazy. Like they brought in this guy just for his look, right? Like, and I can't find
Yeah.
anything on him. It's like this guy doesn't, his IMDb is like there's not even a picture of him on it. Just want to know what Greg Dunham looks like
Without
normally.
the
You know what I mean?
glasses. I like how he's turning in his suit for like a cool leather jacket. I'm talking about Joseph Gordon-Levitt's
Chris
character.
Pratt.
Yeah. I like how he turns in his suit for a leather jacket, and then he's getting the gun ready and everything like that. And he looks at the glasses on his bedside table, and I'm thinking he's gonna put on the glasses to like complete the badass look, but it's just there to remind him of Bone, who always wears glasses, to write down, I have to kill Bone first.
He writes kill Bone and then he's right first.
Yeah. Like he has to do that first, right? And so then, oh man, it's just really smart how this story establishes so much, and then you get paid off. You get the payoff for every single thing it establishes. And I know that probably sounds like a very obvious thing, but because there is so much to fit in there, there's so much payoff afterwards, and it's just kind of a feel good sort of ending, because it feels like it hits every mark, even to the point in the very beginning where he says, I fall asleep randomly, and then you see that at the end. And then he has his notebook that he writes down everything to help him remember, but then Matthew Good, Gary, it has his notebook, so he can't do it, and then everything with the shoelace, it's great.
I like at the very end when Gary's like, did you actually forget? Because that was kind of it's like, I'm pretty sure he did actually forget, and he just kind of remembers, like the shoelace helped him. But yeah, that part was pretty great. So at the Thanksgiving thing, I think he probably sleeps with her again, and then he wakes up after getting high, and he comes downstairs, and this is where he just sees all the plans, and it seems like they're just like they wanted him to find out at this point. They were ready to tell him. And
Yeah.
what I find interesting is they're like, oh, we're only stealing from banks that take the money from big agro corps. And I was like, listen, every bank robbing movie I've seen, the justification is that it's insured and they're taking the bank's money and not your money. You know what I mean? And the bank's going to get paid off from, the insurance, and I think it's federally insured. So just like maybe lead with that, like, oh, no one's actually going to lose their money. You know what I mean? But they don't do that in this one. And this is it's funny because this ends up, it's kind of like, I don't know. I think if someone could see this part and be like, that's a little lame.
Oh, yeah, I know what you're going to say.
Because Gary's like, write this down. Whoever has the money has the power. And just like that being Gary's comeuppance that he told him to write that down is like, I enjoyed it, but I could also see someone being like, that's a little too cute.
That's not what I thought you were going to say. What I thought you were going to mention is when he gets upset and he thinks he's being used, which he is, but then they talk him out of, like, you're not being used. We actually like you as a friend. Wink, wink, hint, hint. No, we don't, sort of thing, right?
Right.
And he's going to leave, but then he sees Isla Fisher up, like, at the top of the stairs, beckoning him, and he just, like, sleeps with her again and then just decides to leave the next morning. I thought you were going to mention that as being kind of like, if you just watch that out of context, it's like dumb of him to do that, right? To like, he's about to leave, but then he just, okay, you know what I mean though, right? It's
Well, I
just
think
like
he
the
forgets.
turnaround is so fast.
But he also forgets stuff, and then also Isla Fisher wanted to have sex with him, so he was like, "Yeah, I'm gonna do that." This is when you find out that she is with Gary, right? Because he has sex with her, he leaves the next day, and then as he leaves, Isla Fisher's in the window, and then Gary comes up behind her and sort of puts his arm around her.
Yeah.
So I always took that to mean that was like his girl, and he was like kind of using her, as part of this. And
Like
so when she leaves later
prostituting her out.
yeah, and so when she leaves later, she's not just leaving, she's like leaving Gary too, like getting away from Gary.
I thought there was a scene before that where they kissed. Like, I thought we knew that she was Gary's girl before that arm wraparound scene.
Maybe, I'm not sure. I mean, he might have kissed her on the like as a greeting though. The other thing too is, so there's the part where, in order to convince him, they're like, why don't you call your dad and ask for $10,000? He's like, or just ask for $1,000. And he goes to the bank with Lewis to get a loan for their sandwich shop. I love the bit where he's like, oh, we could name a sandwich after you. What's your first name? Reuben. Oh, okay. What's your middle name? And then afterwards he's like, I think that went well besides that whole Reuben first name thing.
Yeah, and the fact that his sandwich shop has the most unappealing name for a
Lose your
restaurant
lunch.
ever. Yeah, exactly.
Well, and then they have, he hits on the waitress in front of him. He's like, oh, we're just two gimps out. And he's like, I'm not a gimp. He basically calls him like fucking incel. Like, no one wants to fuck you blind guy. And just like goes at him. But then what I want to talk about is right after this, he calls his dad and he's like, hey, I need $10,000. He's like, why? For that stupid restaurant? All right, just give me $1,000. Like, what for? He's like, and I was like, I didn't remember this, but he actually comes up with a decent reason. He's like, I want to start a skate sharpening business at the thing. And then his dad's just like, oh, I think we should talk about this. He's like, so are you saying no? And he's like, yeah, I'm saying no. It is completely reasonable to not agree to give your son $10,000 or $1,000 at 3 a.m. on a phone call.
100%. Especially one who can be like easily manipulated into he calls him at 3 a.m, asking for $10,000. It's like, okay, my son's in debt with loan sharks. Like, that's my first thought. Like, you're in trouble. It's like, are you in trouble? No. It's like his second, like, he comes to is like, you want it for that stupid restaurant? It's like, no, dude, he just probably is in trouble and he lied to you. Like, but yeah, everything is handled so poorly. I agree with you. I was like, that is not how you ask your rich parents for $10,000. I don't know the right way to do it, but I just know that's the wrong way to do it.
Yeah, that ain't it, Chief. So he immediately decides to start working with Gary after this. And we get a bunch of like quick scenes, but they're all kind of important. He finds out that he's just going to be the lookout. He's not really going to have to do any dirty work. The next night, he's taking pictures of the vault, and the deputy comes up, and he's like, what are you doing? He's like, I just want my parents to see where I work. And he's like, give me the camera. I'm sure your parents would love to have you in the photo.
Yeah. And I don't know if you know that trope, right? But like, I saw that coming a million miles away.
Well, you know it because it's like the movie's not going to end there, right? So it doesn't matter, you know what I mean? But it's more like played for a laugh than anything. And I love the setup for this deputy, and then the payoff I think is so great in in the last scene, or second to last scene. So they explain to him again, like, you're the lookout, and just for the deputy, because like he's the only thing we can't control because he's just so unpredictable. He comes at whenever. And then we get the last scene with Lovely when she comes over, and I think it's like they have sex, and then she walks out to go get a drink, and it's slightly ironic that she walks past Lewis, who is blind, and like doesn't see him there.
Yeah, but like, I don't know. It's dark. No lights are on.
Why are you blind? I looked at the sun too long. Oh, wow. You hear about that, but it's just crazy.
Okay, so you say that like she's actually stupid, but I'm thinking she's playing dumb at this point, right? Like she's She's
sure.
playing the whole thing. She's playing dumb in front of him. My favorite part of that whole interaction is the right at the beginning where she's waving her hand in front of his face, and he's like, "I know you're not waving your hand in front of a blind guy's face right now." But I took her whole like believing that the sun is what blinded him thing as just playing dumb.
And he's an asshole, but he just like happens to be right. And I almost feel like Joseph Gordon-Levitt is listening in on this, and it's like he kind of knows he's right too, because he's not like breaking in to like tell him to go fuck himself.
It's interesting that you would see the point of view of Joseph Gordon-Levitt at this scene, because nothing ever happens to him in his relationship with Lewis. I mean, I guess it does. I guess that's like the like that's the setup for his outburst at the restaurant when Lewis hit on the waitress, right? I think that happened afterwards.
That scene hasn't happened. I said it already happened, but it hasn't. And what's funny about that scene when he hits on the waitress and he gets mad at him, and he's like, "I'm moving out," and he's like, "You're moving out when?" "I don't know when, but soon." It's like a child, you know what I mean? He like plays that character very well. And then the one of the worst, and I don't want to shit on someone who just has a very small part in a movie.
Are you talking about the waitress?
One of the worst line deliveries is like, "Oh, you two are trouble." I really blame the director. Maybe do another take on that. Maybe a couple more takes where she gets it right.
You can't be too hard on her, man. I mean, Jesus. But
honestly, one of the scenes after that I think is worse, and it's from Isla Fisher. I don't really necessarily blame her on that either. So we talked about the taking pictures of the vault, you're the lookout, the sex. We talked about way earlier when he like yells at the deputies, like, "Quit making me feel like, that I need to be checked up on and that you're feeling sorry for me, and take your donut back." And then Lovely sees the gun and she leaves town. And this is like her acting in the back of that cab is super melodramatic and just like could have been a little more subtle to me.
It must have been really bad, because honestly, I don't even remember a back of the cab scene.
Yeah, well, there wasn't an all black chessboard in the back of the cab, so you probably weren't paying attention to it.
Was the cab parallel parking? If not, I don't give a fuck.
He was idling in the middle of the street as she told him, "Wait, stop," and he's just like, "What the fuck, lady?" Let's keep it moving. And then it's the night of the robbery, and I think this part's really interesting because he is like ready to do this, and then the manager's like, "You know what? You have been working hard, and I just realized how far you've come." And he hands him this card, which becomes an important plot point. And he's like, "So you can start to be a teller." And he's like, "Shit, I don't want to do this anymore." And he calls Lewis, and Lewis is just like, "I don't know," kind of blows him off because he's sort of still mad and doesn't really understand what he's talking about. And then this is when Matthew Good like turns on him because he's like, "I don't want to do it. You guys can do it. I'm just going to leave." And then he just like punches the shit out of him. And is like, "Get the fuck in there." And he was already going to kill him, but now it's like for sure he was going to kill him. Later on in the movie, he's like, "Yeah, for a few days there, we thought maybe we could just let you go." But it's like, no, you were always going to kill him.
But that makes, I guess because he, no matter how dedicated or seemingly dedicated he is to the robbery, he's your loose end, right? He's your loosest end. Because of his brain injury, he would even accidentally say something to someone.
Yeah, for sure. He knows what you guys look like, and like you don't seem like the smartest outfit, so I think it would give you up. So the deputy comes by, he apologizes, which ends up leading to the deputy coming back later on, which I think that leads to the deputy dying instead of Joseph Gordon-Levitt, right? If the deputy never comes back, then Joseph Gordon-Levitt dies and the movie ends and they get away. But the deputy comes back and he ends up being the one that dies. They also make Chris get the money. He gets all the money out, and then there's this second where he doesn't come out and Bone's waiting for him out there, and Bone was going to shoot him like right then and there. But this is like the thing I want to talk about the most. Deputy shows up, and he has been shit on this whole time. All the robbers call him Deputy Dog. And or Deputy Donut. And fucking
Deputy
Deputy
Donut, yeah.
Donut killed 3 of these dudes. 2
Well,
of them right away, and
two and a
Gary.
half.
Yeah. And like I think he hit Bone too, or did he not? Maybe he didn't. Maybe
No,
Bone ducked.
Bone got
But
away.
he fucking went off, and then just like didn't realize that. How did you misplace that you didn't hit Bone? He looks like fucking Bone, man. Like
what did he say that Lewis looked like? Larry Flint, right?
yeah.
But yeah, so he was he knows he didn't hit Bone because he was asking Gary, like, where's Shotgun?
Yeah.
And then Joseph Gordon-Levitt was like, he's behind you, but it was too late. But I don't know. The guy who is dying, do you really hold him at gunpoint and ask where the other guy is? Or do you just keep your defenses up and look for the other guy? I don't know. I think he went about that wrong.
Yeah, I mean, well, for how badass he came off for most of it, to then stand in the middle and only look in one direction is like, get to a wall.
Or get out of there. Like you shoot the immediate threat, and you know that there's like more, like you don't know how many more could be there. You turn, you get back in your car, and you call for backup. But he went in even farther.
You know what though? Dumb. I thought about the backup part of it. There isn't backup. This is like a one-horse town. He's the only one on patrol in this town. So it's like backup was way too far away.
I guess unless he was like out there, unless he was like knowingly trying to save Chris, right? Like I don't know. But yeah.
No, because he told Chris, he was like, Chris, he didn't even know Chris was in there. He's like, get the fuck down. So maybe he was looking for Chris. I don't know. But Chris uses this opportunity this is also like really well written. He goes out to his car, but once again, he's locked his keys in and he can't get to his shoe quick enough. So he goes to the other car, and this is the car that has the money in it.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, he's got a brain injury, but it feels like you could probably get your key out to your shoe rather than take the chance that the keys are in the other car. But I don't know, whatever. He leaves and he has the money, and they all realize he has the money. And then Chris gets pulled over, which is so unnecessary. And at first, when the cop pulls him over and then lets him go, I was like, oh, he just must know who Chris Pratt is, and he knows about the brain injury. But no, it's the card that the bank manager gave him that was stuck to his ID when he handed it to him.
I also like that the whole movie is building up that Chris hates when people feel sorry for him, and he sees that as like he got away with speeding, which is like a crime, but it's a small crime, right? But he got away with it because of the card. And he was like, I am not going to be underestimated anymore. Like that was the final motivation, like push he needed to like go back and fucking deal with this thing. And I love the dead giveaway of when he goes back to his apartment and he sees the lights are on and he knows that they're already there, because why would a blind guy need the lights on?
Yeah, and I love too the fact that Bone just starts going downstairs immediately and like chases after him. Just like so menacing, Bone.
Dumb, right? But whatever. I mean, they don't really strike me as the smartest group, so.
Well, I mean, he needed to chase after him. I mean, he almost got him. He probably should just fire the shotgun, but I guess you don't want to. The apartment is in Kansas City, so if you fire a shotgun, you're probably going to make quite a bit of noise.
Right.
So then he hides out at his parents', which is like, I don't know, they probably know where your parents live. I don't know why that's safe, but I guess it's like maybe a gated community. And this
I don't think
when
they do, but yeah, go ahead.
Well, they said they were casing him for weeks. They probably would have followed him to his parents. Either way, he goes to his notebook. He reads 2 very important things: start at the end, and who has the money has the power. Yeah, once again, the list making scene where he's like, kill Bone first.
I do have to say a funny, I said that this movie foreshadows and builds up a bunch of things that pay off in the end. It explains to us that his parents have like this very extensive gun collection and they're always adding to it. And so when he like gets the shotgun, it's not so out of left field. Like, we know his parents have a gun collection. But my favorite part is when establishing this, he's in his dad's study and he cocks the gun. And Lewis goes, well, that's a comforting sound.
Yeah. Yeah, it's good. I right after this he calls Gary, and I love that from this point on it's like Gary's just dying. And Matthew Good plays it so well, and it's just like you can see, like, from this point to this point to this point, like he's getting worse and worse and worse, and it's just played very perfectly.
When we were on when we were on Steve's These Films Are the Juice podcast, and we were talking about good actors to kind of take over a younger Pacino role, Matthew Good, I didn't think about it then, but Matthew Good would be a great younger Pacino.
Maybe it wouldn't be younger anymore, but you're saying to play it now.
Yeah, he's 44. I think that fits the time frame.
They'll remake The Godfather with him, and then they'll remake Casablanca with Ashton Kutcher and Madonna. So he calls Gary, and he's like, I have the money, I have the power. And Gary's just like, fuck, man, why did I tell him that? He's like, meet me at the Christmas tree. And this is one of the points where we could have saved a few minutes. When he has the dream sequence where he follows Kelly up there, and she's just like, I've been waiting for this. I wanted to show you my missing leg.
Yeah, I the second that I was like, is this real? I was like, no way is he doing this in such an intense moment in his life.
He has 14 minutes, right? It was like 5:46, and he starts to follow her. It makes no sense.
Right. And then there's something about her, like, ethereal about her line delivery, and I was like, oh, this is where we get the payoff that he falls asleep fast. I mean, it's not really a payoff, but it's an explanation of why he's having this just random sequence, right? Also, Laura, what's her name? Laura Vandervoot, I think, is
okay.
I know her from Smallville, but she's just so freaking hot. Sorry, just have to put that out there.
Yeah, I mean, you didn't have to, but you did.
I did.
That's where we are.
But then that's when we noticed that everyone walked away with something from that crash, right? Like, he walked away with.
You don't know if the leg's real.
No, but I mean, he has to know. Like, I think that's real.
I don't know. Maybe he's got a brain injury. So,
no.
He wakes up to a shotgun breaking in his window, and apparently no one is out at this ice rink at 6:00. They can just threaten people with guns in the middle of downtown Kansas City with no repercussions.
I mean, have you ever been to downtown Kansas City? It's pretty dead.
Have you?
Yeah.
When?
Back in 2016. 2016.
That because Taylor's from Missouri.
Yeah.
So, I disagree. And having never been there, I just don't think. I think somebody would have seen something from a building, maybe. So they find his notebook, and they're like, I love that when he's like, oh, we're gonna go get this money. He's like, gotta kill Bone first. And he's like, well, they both look at him like, what? He's like, oh shit, I said that out loud.
Yeah, and when he's packing up the gun and the money and everything at his parents' house, he unties his shoe and he takes his shoelace out, but it doesn't really explain why he's doing it until you get to the point where he tied his shoelace around the bag that has the gun in it as a visual trigger for him later, knowing he's most likely to totally forget. And then when he sees it and he does forget why he has the shoelace on, he knows that he did this for a reason. So when he throws one of the bags of money up to Bone, he keeps the one with the shoelace on. And he must be thinking I don't know why I have this, but it must be a reason. And then it's just and I loved it too. He didn't open up the zipper and take out the gun. He shot the gun through the bag to kill Bone. And Jeff Daniels being blind and knowing that there's a gun in front of him. And then he hears the shotgun and he's like, am I dead? Well, no one's
I
talking to
must
me,
be,
so I must be dead.
yeah, I must be dead. Well, they also, by the way, you talk about how well this movie established everything. They established that he's a great shot too. He's like, oh yeah, I used to go skeet shooting with my brothers and my dad like all the time when he was talking with Isla Fisher.
Oh no, he
I,
says it kills deer, and she's like, "You kill poor baby deer," and he's like, "I hated it," which is another interesting thing too, right? It establishes that he hated it, but he's just really good at it.
I don't remember the hated it part, but it doesn't matter. The other thing I want to talk about in this final bit is there's this part where Bone walks up to him with one of the walks up to Gary with one of the bags and kind of looks at him and just like, oh, you're like easy pickings right now. And Gary grabs his gun and it's just like, don't think about it. But Gary dies like a minute later, just of his own accord.
So this is what I understand. They know where the money is, right? The only person that they have is the blind guy, and Joseph Gordon-Levitt is like on the ground, and they have the money and they have the gun. Why not just kill him right then and there?
Because then they have to dig up the money themselves and carry it all. You know what I mean?
No, he's dug up the money.
Yeah, it's to carry it himself.
He's carrying it. Jesus. Okay,
They also,
whatever.
but they also, I mean, like they underestimate a blind guy and a guy with head trauma who can't remember anything. Why would they think that he had planned to have a
Having
gun
a
planted
gun.
there?
Yeah, I guess you're right.
Um,
And I think that's a big plot, like a big point in the movie is people are always underestimating Chris, so it's easy for him to get the one up on them, when he's not forgetting or getting things out of place.
well, they're usually right though. He's not even good at chess anymore. So, right after this, we get like just sort of the epilogue, and I always thought maybe he had like kept part of the money because I knew that they opened their gas station food store. But I like that he gave it all up and that his own bank manager like gave him the loan and comes to eat all the time. And we also get this little moment where Kelly looks over at him. So she's known that he's here this whole time when she walks to work, but she looks over at him this one time and just like acknowledging it. And then, I mean, I just didn't remember this ending so poorly, but we have this voiceover of him explaining his life, but then it just keeps going. He's like, just keep remembering day by day and work backwards. And I just have to work backwards from there. And then he stares at the camera and I was like, oh my God, like you guys could end that a little better.
It ends very like 2000-ish, like freeze frame, fade out, and then the music,
Yeah, I mean, it had, Vandervoort from Smallville. So yeah, they were Vandervoort. They were playing all into it. You know what's really interesting? And I wanted to bring this up earlier. So Scott Frank, he wrote this and then, decided to direct it when he couldn't get anyone on. Do you know what else he wrote and created and directed? The Queen's Gambit. He created it and directed every episode.
Oh, wow. Look at him.
Yeah. And he wrote Logan.
He wrote
Little movie.
The Wolverine movie?
Yeah. He actually wrote The Wolverine too.
Oh, wow. That one probably isn't the best example.
He wrote Get Shorty, Out of Sight, and Minority Report. This dude.
He wrote Minority Report?
It's according to
dude is talented, man.
Yeah, he is. There are other writers on here, but Philip K. Dick wrote the short story, and then Scott Frank and John Cohen wrote the screenplays. So, well, yeah, this was like I said, there was a couple. You kind of described it pretty perfectly. Like it was very mid 2000s, like some of the moments in this.
Right.
But overall, this is like a nice little surprise movie if you've never heard of it or never seen it, to like watch it and just be like, oh wow, it's like, I don't know, if Netflix made this movie today, it just would probably suck, but it didn't, and it was really good.
Yeah, and you can find this movie on Pluto TV, Hoopla, which is an app that you introduced me to, or you can buy it on Amazon. I would not suggest going the Pluto TV route, but that's my own gripes with Pluto TV. No, I really like this movie. It like you said, it was a nice surprise. I'm just like, it's surprised that I've never even heard of it. It just, maybe I have, and it just was like such a low budget, under the radar sort of thing that it just, I glossed over it. But apart from me noticing tiny little details throughout the whole movie, no, it was a great movie, and I hope Joseph Gordon-Levitt kind of makes a bit of a comeback, because I think he has great leading man potential if he's in the right stuff for him.
A remake of the movie The Right Stuff?
Yeah.
Well, thanks for listening to another episode of I Finally Watched. This is David.
And this is Alon, and I finally watched The Lookout.
So, but then, he goes to meet with Janet, who's played by Carla Gugino. How do you fucking pronounce her name?
Close enough, dude. Good job.
No. Hold on. I'm going to say it again, because that was embarrassing. How do you say Carla Gugino? Hold on. We're looking this up. How?
So many cuts.
It's fine.
My stomach keeps rumbling. I wonder if that can be picked up.
So next he goes to meet his like social worker, Janet, played by Carl Motherfucker! Gugino. Okay.
That's staying in the cut. That's staying.
It absolutely is not. So next he goes to meet his social worker, Janet, played by Carlo Gugino.
You messed up Carla. You said Carl. Okay, now it's going in the cut. Now
it's absolutely not. We're not doing rip tracks, Alon.
You messed up one more time. It's going in the cut. It's going in as a cold open.
So next, you can make it the cold open.